It was a quiet Sunday evening, and there I was sitting at the kitchen table, going through a pile of medical forms for my son, Ethan. He was getting ready for his upcoming school year, and at 6 years old, he was a bundle of endless energy, the center of my world. Maya, my wife, had left her own stack of papers scattered across the table, as usual. As I glanced over, something small but chilling caught my eye. Under blood type for Ethan, it listed AB. I just stared, frozen in disbelief. That couldn't be right. My mind was spinning. After what felt like forever, I rummaged through our old medical records from last year's physicals. Even though deep down, I already knew the truth. My blood type is O, and Maya's is A. There's no way we could have a child with AB blood type if Maya was Ethan's mother. And I was there in the delivery room, watching him come into this world. Then it meant someone else, someone with B blood, had to be his father. The house was quiet. The kids were asleep, and Maya was in the living room, glued to the TV. I grabbed a beer from the fridge and headed out to the back patio, trying to make sense of it all. Had our marriage really been that bad? I would have said it was fine, some good days, some bad ones. Just like any other couple, I thought. When we first met, the passion was undeniable. Couldn't keep our hands off each other. But over time, that fire settled down, becoming a steady, comfortable warmth. But now, with this cold, hard fact in front of me, I started questioning everything I thought I knew about our relationship. When did things change between us? Was it all at once, or did it creep up on us? Looking back, it seemed like both. Our intimacy faded slowly, but about 7 years ago, right before Ethan was conceived, something strange happened. Maya, usually affectionate and open, started acting off. She'd come home late from work some nights, barely let me touch her, and would rush straight to the shower, avoiding me for the rest of the night. This would happen again the next day, same coldness. And then suddenly, she'd flip, cooking me romantic dinners, initiating passionate nights, telling me how much she loved me. It was like she was playing some kind of push-and-pull game with my heart, and it lasted for 2 or 3 months. I asked her, again and again, if something was wrong. I even asked if there were problems at work or if we were drifting apart. But every time, she brushed me off with, "I don't know, Henry. I'm used to it. I'm sorry." Eventually, things evened out, but it wasn't the same. The spark was gone. Maya became more stable, but also distant. Physical affection became rare. Intimacy, when it happened, was more out of obligation than desire, once every week or two, and that was only if I initiated. And let me tell you, any time I hinted at wanting to be close, she dismissed it with barely a second thought. I had to spell it out for her, and even then, she acted like being with me was some favor she was reluctantly granting. Was this just how all marriages ended up? I didn't know, since this was the only one I'd ever been in. Sure, I wondered if she was seeing someone else, but then she got pregnant with Ethan, and all those suspicions seemed to fade away. The excitement and chaos of becoming parents overwhelmed any doubts I had. After Ethan was born, we were both exhausted. I chalked her continued coldness up to the demands of raising a baby. When Ethan was 2, we had our daughter, Emma, and she came into the world just after Ethan's 3rd birthday. By that point, Henry and Maya, the passionate couple, were long gone, replaced by mom and dad, chasing after 2 wonderful but draining kids. We loved them fiercely, but that missing piece in our marriage, especially in the bedroom, only grew bigger. I never really acknowledged it, probably because I thought it was just what happened when you had young kids. But now, knowing the painful truth that Ethan wasn't biologically mine, all those moments from 7 years ago, the distance, the late nights, the urgent showers looked a lot darker. That had to be when she started an affair. It explained everything. The sudden bursts of affection and warmth Maya showed after those cold spells made sense now. They could have been nothing more than guilt, her way of trying to throw me off the scent while she kept sneaking around behind my back. As I sat in the fading light of the backyard, the initial shock of my discovery started hardening into a cold, seething rage. This wasn't just infidelity. My wife hadn't simply cheated on me. She had conceived another man's child and let me live under the illusion that he was mine. And for all I knew, Emma might not even be my daughter either. If my only goal at that moment had been to punish Maya, I would have stormed inside, shoved the blood-type evidence in her face, demanded a confession, and kicked her lying ass out. But it wasn't that simple. I loved my children fiercely, no matter what their DNA said. If we ended up divorcing over this, and let's be honest, infidelity would be a big reason, Maya would probably get primary custody. And that was a nightmare I couldn't bear. I needed to be smart about this, not impulsive, so I asked myself, what did I really want? Surprisingly, the answers came pretty quickly. First, I needed to know the whole truth about what Maya had done. Was this just some brief fling she had? Or did she know all along that Ethan wasn't mine? Had she been fully aware, carrying on a full-blown affair for years? And second, I was determined to raise Ethan and Emma as my own, shielding them from the ugly truth about their biological father. Those kids were my world, and I wasn't about to let them get hurt by Maya's choices. Once I knew what I wanted, the next steps became crystal clear. I went back inside, and Maya had already gone to bed. I quietly tiptoed into the kids' rooms, and, as they slept, I carefully swabbed the inside of their cheeks with cotton swabs. I labeled Ethan as number 2 and Emma as number 3. Then I went into the bathroom, swabbed my own cheek, and marked it as number 1. I had a college buddy who worked in a DNA lab. I'd send him the samples anonymously. Once I had the results, I know what I was really dealing with. A week later, my buddy called. He had no clue what was writing on these results, so I played it cool, pretending it was for some distant cousins I was trying to connect. Well, Henry, he said, subjects 2 and 3 are full siblings, no doubt about that. But subject 1, he's not related to either of them. Looks like they're not your cousins after all. I thanked him, hung up, and just sat there for a moment. The facts were staring me in the face. Ethan and Emma had the same 2 parents, but I wasn't one of them. Maya had 2 kids with this other guy. But the real question was, did Maya know? She obviously knew she had slept with him. But was she aware that he had fathered both of our kids? I had to find out, and there was an easy way to do it. The next day, I casually approached her while she was making dinner. Without looking directly at her, I tossed out, "Oh hey, I forgot to mention, there's this guy at work, his friend's a geneticist doing some research. He needs DNA samples from families. I told him we could donate some from you, me, and the kids. I'll grab the kids' samples before bed if that's cool. Then we can do ours afterward. Sound good?" I watched her closely while I spoke, and sure enough, Maya froze, almost dropping the spoon she was stirring with. She recovered quickly, kept stirring, but her whole body tensed. When I finished, there was this long, uncomfortable silence before she turned to me. "I don't know, Henry. How do we know what they'll do with our DNA? What if it's not private?" she asked, her voice shaky. I started to reassure her, but she cut me off sharply. "No, I'm not comfortable with this. Just tell your coworker we'll pass." "Sure, honey, no problem," I said, trying to sound casual. But her reaction said it all. She knew. She had to know. Now that I had her figured out, my next step was clear. Find proof of the affair. Who, where, when, maybe even why. If Maya had been sneaking around, there had to be evidence somewhere, probably right here in our house. But to find it, I needed time, uninterrupted time, to search. Luckily, we had plans to take the kids over to Maya's parents' place that Saturday. I decided I'd beg off with a last-minute work emergency and use the empty house to my advantage. A few minutes before we were set to leave, I slipped into the bedroom and called the home phone from my cell. I put on a show, pretending to have a tense conversation with my boss, making it sound like there was some crisis only I could handle. Maya walked in just as I hung up the phone with an exaggerated sigh. "Honey, I hate to do this, but I've got to head into the office for a few hours. There's been a major system crash, and it could end up costing the company millions if I don't handle it," I said, trying to sound as apologetic as possible. "I feel awful about it." Maya frowned, clearly irritated. "Seriously? My parents are expecting us, and the kids are going to be disappointed." I know. I'm really sorry," I replied, pulling her into a quick hug. "But you go on without me, okay? Give them my apologies, and I'll meet you back here tonight. I'll just grab some dinner alone." She sighed but agreed, though I could see the annoyance written all over her face. Still, a few minutes later, she had the kids buckled into the car and was on her way. I watched them drive off, then turned my attention back to the house. I had a good 4 or 5 hours to dig through everything and find what I needed. I started by eliminating the obvious places I spent most of my time: the kitchen, the living room, my side of the bedroom. Maya wouldn't be foolish enough to hide anything where I might easily stumble across it. Instead, I focused on her closet, her dresser drawers, anywhere she thought she could safely tuck things away. In the back of her closet, I found something that gave me pause: a few sets of sexy lingerie, tucked away so well that I knew she was intentionally hiding them from me. I'd never seen her wear any of it. That only added fuel to the fire. The kids' rooms were unlikely to hold any secrets, so I left those alone and headed up to the attic. The place was a cluttered mess: old furniture, boxes of keepsakes, lamps gathering dust. But there, off to the side, were 3 boxes stacked together. One had noticeably less dust than the others, and the grime on the floor in front of them had been disturbed recently. Maya had been in there, and it looked like I'd found what I was looking for. I opened the boxes and rifled through their contents. Most of what I found were old letters and cards, things from her past, like mementos from friends and ex-boyfriends. There was a bundle of notes I had written her during our early relationship, which felt like a cruel joke in the moment. But buried deep, hidden beneath the harmless memories, was a slim stack of newer-looking notes, along with 2 unlabeled VHS tapes. I grabbed them and hurried downstairs to investigate. It only took me about 20 minutes of reading through the letters to uncover nearly everything I needed. Maya had been having an affair with her boss, David, and it had been going on for years, starting just a few months before Ethan was conceived. The pieces all clicked into place, matching up with the time she'd been acting strangely at home. The letters were all from David, and they were nothing short of disgusting. They weren't love letters. They were crude, controlling, and downright revolting. From the very beginning, their relationship was more like a twisted dom-sub dynamic, with him dictating every aspect of their affair. He told her how to dress, what to do, and detailed in graphic terms what he planned to do with her during their late-night work sessions. Some of the notes even referenced their children, with David mocking me, calling me the naive idiot who was raising his kids. There was no doubt in my mind anymore. They both knew those children were his. They reveled in the deception, keeping that vile secret between them. David, of course, had no interest in stepping up as their father. He had his own family, and his poor wife had no idea what kind of man she was married to, just like I hadn't. My hands shook with anger as I read through the letters. It was clear David held some kind of control over Maya, but she wasn't an innocent victim here. There was no hint of blackmail or coercion. She played her part willingly, eagerly even, and she relished it. They both enjoyed the thrill of deceiving me, of hiding this monstrous lie in plain sight. I couldn't gather much about Maya's true feelings from David's letters, but one thing was certain: she had been betraying me for most of our marriage. She had deliberately conceived another man's children and allowed me to believe they were mine. I had been angry before, but this took me to a whole new level. I felt a rage so deep that I had to take a moment to steady myself. David wasn't going to get away with this either. He was going to factor into my revenge, no question about it. Once I calmed down enough to think clearly, I brought the VHS tapes over to the VCR and pressed play. Both tapes were homemade recordings of Maya and David having sex, and it didn't take long to realize the first one was from years ago, based on Maya's hairstyle. They were in a bedroom I didn't recognize, probably David's house. The second tape was much more recent, and what sickened me most was that it had been filmed in my own damn bed. I sat there, wondering when she could have done this. Then it hit me: there were a couple of short business trips I had taken over the past year. She must have pawned the kids off on her parents during those weekends, using that time to sneak him into our home. What played out on both tapes was hard to stomach. David completely dominated Maya in the bedroom, and she was all too eager to go along with it, loving every filthy second. The lighting was low, but I could still see them clearly. Every moan, every word they exchanged was captured by the audio. Even on the older tape, David was already barking orders at her. He sat on the bed and commanded her to strip, which she did with a smile that I hadn't seen in years. There was no tenderness, no love, just rough sex and the foulest language you could imagine. Maya seemed to thrive on it. It made me sick to see how much she enjoyed herself. The second tape was more of the same, but this time there was a bit of dialogue that grabbed my attention. After they were done, they laid in bed, and Maya casually asked David why he didn't mind that I was raising his kids. He laughed, clearly amused, and replied, "Henry is a decent guy. Loves playing daddy. You said so yourself. I already have 3 brats of my own. I don't need more." Maya giggled and playfully smacked him on the chest. "Be nice. Henry is a good man. He takes great care of me and the children. That's why you've let me keep our fun going for so long, right?" She smiled up at him, that coy, manipulative smile she never used on me anymore. "You've never been the nurturing type. Not like my sweet husband." David grabbed her roughly, rolling on top of her, and growled, "I give you what you really want. Don't ever forget that." That was it. I couldn't watch anymore. I sat back, stunned at their audacity. Not just having this long-running affair behind my back, but being so brazen about it. They didn't just cheat on me. They had let me raise his kids as my own. And to top it off, they were careless enough to leave this evidence lying around where I could find it. It was almost like they didn't think I'd ever catch on. But now I knew exactly how I was going to make both of them pay. The next day at work, I used a high-quality scanner to digitize every letter, turning them into PDF files. Then, with some advanced AV equipment from a project I'd worked on the year before, I converted the VHS tapes into digital files. I edited them, ensuring they were clear and concise. Everything was saved on an encrypted hard drive, and I stashed the physical copies in the trunk of my car, beneath the spare tire. After that, I returned the attic to the way I'd found it, making sure Maya would never know I had been up there. For the next 2 weeks, I meticulously put my plan into action. Surprisingly, it wasn't hard for me to keep up the facade, pretending like nothing was wrong. After all, Maya had been lying to my face for over 6 years, so why couldn't I return the favor? I played the role of the attentive father and dutiful husband, all while the anger simmered inside me. I didn't initiate any intimacy, though. I couldn't bring myself to touch her, much less look at her without feeling disgust. But I let her make the moves, which she did, oblivious to the storm brewing just beneath the surface. As it happened, Maya had a big event coming up that provided the perfect opportunity for me to strike. After years of serving on the board of a prominent local charity, she had been named the new chairwoman. It was a huge honor, and the position would be made official at a fancy dinner where she was expected to give a speech outlining her vision for the organization. Maya was over the moon, but she was also nervous about the speech. Naturally, she turned to me for help, asking if I could put together a PowerPoint presentation to go along with her remarks. I couldn't have asked for a better chance. Over the next few evenings, we worked on her presentation together. I watched as she proudly laid out her bullet points and picked out graphics to accompany them. She practiced the speech several times, and everything seemed to be coming together perfectly. She had no idea what I had in store for her. While Maya was focused on her charity event, I was carefully working behind the scenes, preparing the real show for that night. One she'd never forget. What Maya didn't know was that I had been working on a different slide deck, one that would ensure this night was unforgettable, but not in the way she'd imagined. The day before the big event, I casually asked if she had invited David and his wife. She smiled and confirmed that they would both be there. My excitement grew, but for reasons far removed from hers. On the night of the dinner, Maya looked stunning in a floor-length black gown, and I put on my best suit. To anyone watching us arrive early to set up, we must have looked like the perfect couple. I helped load her PowerPoint presentation and ran through a quick sound check. Everything worked flawlessly just as I planned. The dinner itself went smoothly, with laughter and small talk filling the room. We made our way through the courses, and eventually, the outgoing chairwoman took the stage to introduce Maya. She praised my wife's dedication and leadership, setting Maya up for her big moment. I glanced at the clock, knowing Maya's happiness would come crashing down in precisely 3 minutes and 12 seconds. Maya walked to the podium, her face glowing with pride. She began her speech confidently, outlining her vision for the charity, and the crowd hung on her every word. But right at the 3-minute and 12-second mark, the slides behind her shifted, not to more stock photos of underprivileged children, but to something far more damning. A series of still images appeared, pulled from the homemade sex tapes I had found. The lighting in some was dim, But there was no mistaking Maya and David, caught in various compromising positions. Maya continued speaking for a few moments, oblivious to the crowd's growing gasps and whispers. But soon enough, she noticed. Mid-sentence, she glanced back over her shoulder, and her face paled instantly. She let out an audible gasp and scrambled to the laptop, frantically clicking buttons to try and stop the presentation. But it was no use. I had locked it down. As the still images transitioned to video clips, the ballroom fell into a stunned silence. Maya's voice, caught on tape in moans of ecstasy, filled the room, followed by David's commanding voice, growling, "You're going to take every inch of me like you were made for it." Maya recoiled in horror, her hands flying to cover her mouth as the shock of the situation hit her full force. The crowd's quiet disbelief quickly turned into shouts of outrage. "Disgusting," someone yelled. "How could you?" another shouted, as people began rising from their tables. Maya stood frozen in place, her face a mask of humiliation, tears streaming down her cheeks. She didn't even try to finish her speech. Then, on the screen, a clip played of David speaking directly into the camera. "Don't worry, baby," he sneered. "Henry is too big of a dumbass to ever figure out those brats aren't his." He laughed cruelly. "Just keep letting him play daddy, and I'll keep giving you what you really need." The room erupted into chaos. Plates and silverware clattered as people stormed out, leaving their dinners half-eaten. I watched with satisfaction as David's wife hurled her glass of wine straight at his head, screaming obscenities before fleeing the ballroom. Within minutes, the room had mostly cleared out, leaving just Maya and me. She stood there at the podium, shoulders shaking with silent sobs, completely defeated. Slowly, she turned to face me, her tear-streaked eyes filled with a mixture of shock and betrayal. "Henry, how could you?" she whispered hoarsely, her voice barely audible. "I thought you loved me." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Loved you? Like you loved me for the past 6 years? While you were getting plowed by your boss behind my back? While you let me raise another man's children, thinking they were mine?" Maya flinched at my words, and it gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. Good. I wanted her to feel a fraction of the pain I'd felt when I uncovered her lies. The betrayal, the humiliation, it was her turn now. "Don't insult me further with your lies." "What's going to happen now?" Maya asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if she already knew the answer. I stood up slowly, approaching her until we were just a few feet apart. I reached into my jacket and pulled out a folded document, holding it out in front of her. "This is what happens now," I said, my voice cold and steady. "I'm filing for divorce, effective immediately. These are the papers serving you." She looked at the papers in disbelief, her face as pale as I'd ever seen it. "If you want joint custody of the kids, you can have it," I continued, staring her down. "But if you fight me on this or try to leave town, I'll bury you. I'll make sure those videos get leaked, and you'll be lucky if you're ever allowed to see Ethan and Emma again." With that final blow, I turned and walked out of the ballroom, leaving Maya crumpled on the floor behind me, tears mixing with the makeup streaking down her face. I had promised myself that I wouldn't shed a tear over her betrayal, and I didn't. I was resolute. My only concern now was protecting my children and salvaging whatever dignity I had left. In the days following that catastrophic charity dinner, I wasted no time cutting ties with Maya. I hired the most ruthless divorce attorney I could find and followed his every instruction to the letter. Within a week, Maya was served with the divorce papers, and I secured a temporary order granting me full custody of Ethan and Emma. Maya was in utter shock. She came to me, pleading for another chance, begging me to let her make things right. For a brief moment, the tiniest part of me felt tempted. I remembered the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. But I couldn't let that cloud my judgment. The images of her betrayal were burned into my mind. I couldn't unsee what I had seen. My attorney's advice was harsh, but exactly what I needed to hear. "She stepped out on you in the most brutal way possible, Henry," he said. "She lied to your face for years while she let another man father your children. You need to hit her hard from the start. Don't give an inch." So, that's what I did. I went scorched earth. Armed with David's letters and the damning videos, I built the case against Maya as an adulterer and an unfit mother. I portrayed her as someone whose depraved behavior could traumatize the children if she were given too much access. My lawyer threatened to leak the tapes if she didn't comply with my demands for full custody and ownership of our home. Maya's legal team tried to get the tapes and letters thrown out as illegally obtained evidence, but my attorney argued that I had every right to investigate suspected infidelity in my own home. We fought hard, and Maya didn't have much of a defense, especially after her reputation was completely destroyed following the charity dinner debacle. The court wasn't inclined to look kindly on her. In the end, it didn't take long. Within 2 months, the divorce was finalized. I was awarded full custody of Ethan and Emma. Maya was granted only supervised visitation, 4 hours every other Saturday in a court-appointed facility. She was forced to vacate our home immediately, and per the court's order, she was allowed no contact with the children outside of those supervised visits until they turned 18. I made it crystal clear that any violation of that agreement would result in those tapes going public. It was a devastating blow for Maya, but I didn't have any sympathy left to offer. She made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. As for me, I had to figure out how to rebuild a life for myself and my children, one step at a time. The first major step was leaving the house. The place was filled with too many painful memories, and staying there would have only prolonged the heartache. I listed it for sale and used the equity to buy a new place, a modest 3-bedroom ranch in a nice family neighborhood with top-notch schools nearby. To make sure Ethan and Emma could process everything in a healthy way, I hired a family therapist who specialized in helping children navigate traumatic life changes. I was determined to do everything I could to help them heal from the chaos Maya had created, even as I worked to heal myself. There was no going back to what we had before, but I hoped that, in time, the kids and I could build something new, something better without the lies and the pain. The kids knew Mommy had done some bad things, enough to keep her from living with us anymore, but we kept the details vague. They never saw the videos or read the letters, and I was determined to preserve their innocence as long as I could. They were still so young, and I didn't want them burdened with the truth of what their mother had done, not yet. For them, the world was still simple. But for me, the path forward felt anything but. So much of my life had been built around being Maya's husband and the father of her children. But now, all of that felt like an illusion, a cruel joke. I wrestled with rage, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of emasculation. My trust in others had been shattered, and I questioned everything about myself, my worth, my judgment, my ability to ever trust again. Thankfully, through all that darkness, there was one bright light, Sophie. Sweet, beautiful Sophie from the office. We had just begun exploring a possible relationship when my world imploded. When the truth about Maya came crashing down, Sophie was there for me in ways I hadn't expected. She became my rock, offering a listening ear, comforting words, and unshakable support. She never judged me for my anger or my pain, and she certainly didn't try to excuse Maya's actions. Sophie was fiercely loyal, and her presence was a balm for the wounds I was struggling to heal. As the divorce played out, Sophie and I grew closer. What started as friendship slowly turned into something deeper. She connected with Ethan and Emma, doting on them as if they were her own. She played games with them, helped them with their homework, and before long, they adored her as much as I did. For me, Sophie was the calm in the chaos, a safe harbor when everything else in my life felt like it was falling apart. We didn't rush things between us. I wasn't ready for that, and she understood. But eventually, one quiet evening, it just felt right. Sophie and I made love for the first time, and it was nothing like what I had experienced before. It wasn't about lust or passion. It was soft, sweet, and healing in a way I hadn't realized I needed. Afterward, she held me close, stroking my hair as I finally allowed myself to cry. Tears I had been holding back for months. I cried for the naive dreams I had once clung to, for the deep betrayal of my heart, for everything I had lost. But I also cried with relief, because in Sophie, I had found someone pure and good again. In the 2 years since that night, Sophie has become my best friend, my partner, and the rock I lean on through all the ups and downs of life. We got married last spring in a small, intimate ceremony with just the kids and a few close friends. Ethan and Emma were our ring bearer and flower girl, and it felt like the fresh start I desperately needed. It was a new chapter in my life, one filled with love, light, and the kind of happiness I had thought I'd never find again. Maya is still a part of our lives, though a distant one. At first, she was committed to her court-ordered visitations, showing up like clockwork. She sobbed through every visit, begging me to stop punishing her and the kids. But those supervised visits were a constant source of shame for her, and eventually, the frequency of her visits tapered off. These days, she shows up once a month, if that. The kids noticed, of course, and asked questions that I never had a good answer for. I could only tell them Mommy loved them in her own way, even if it didn't always seem that way. As for David, I made good on my promise to ruin him. I didn't need to make a spectacle of it. I just quietly passed enough evidence along to his wife, Grace, to confirm his infidelity and the fact that he had fathered children outside their marriage. The fallout was swift and brutal. Grace divorced him, took him for everything he had, and even got a protective order in place. David's world crumbled, and just like that, he was left with nothing. I don't revel in revenge, but knowing that David and Maya both got what they deserved, that gave me some closure. Now, my focus is on rebuilding myself, my children, and my life with Sophie. We've come a long way, and while there are still scars, there is also hope for a future filled with love and happiness. The last I heard, David had lost his job and was living out of his car, having burned through his life savings on legal fees and paying off Grace's hefty demands in the divorce. While I didn't take joy in tearing another family apart, the image of him sitting smugly in those videos, convinced he could destroy my life without any consequences, fueled my need to make him accountable. Some might say I went too far, that I should have walked away and focused on my own healing. Maybe they're right, but in my darkest moments, the thought of making David pay for his arrogance was one of the few things that gave me any sense of satisfaction. These days, my life has found a sense of peace and normalcy again. Sophie has become an incredible mother to Ethan and Emma, and together, we've worked hard to create a loving, stable home for them. The kids are thriving, laughing more than I've heard in years, and I finally feel like our household is filled with the warmth that had been missing for so long. As for Maya, I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive her for her selfish betrayal. There's a small part of me that still loves the woman I thought she was, but I've come to accept that the version of her I cherished never really existed. She was just a mirage, like so much of my former life. Letting go of that illusion has been one of the hardest things I've ever done, but it was necessary. My future may not look anything like I had once planned, but that doesn't mean it's worse. In fact, now that I've shed the weight of Maya's deception, my life feels more real, more authentic than it ever did before. I've found love, joy, and a sense of purpose in this new chapter, surrounded by people who truly care for me and my children. It's been a long and painful journey to get here, but every day, I'm grateful I survived it. I get to spend my life with people who cherish me for who I am, and that's a gift I don't take for granted.